This is Radio Bath.
Hello, and this is Cynthia Wihardja, host of Brave Business Conversation. And we've got such a special treat today. We've got two guests. The first hour, we've got Jo Chavasse, the founder and CEO of Freckles childcare. And then we'll have Andrew Cook, co-founder of Bailey Cook Financial Planning, to talk to us about investing in 2021. But first, I want to say hello to Jo. Hey, Jo, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
All good. Thank you for all your support for Radio Bath, by the way. But I just thought, I want to know more about how you started and the business, and hopefully you'll tell us some top tips today.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, really well. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, we're big fans of Radio Bath, so we thought anything we can do to stay, get to know more people in the area, brilliant. We're all fully behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. You started this business 6 years ago. So tell us more how you got started and what inspired you to start a childcare business. Tell us more about you.
Okay, so I launched the business at the beginning of 2015, and I was straight out of university. I graduated the summer before, so I was 24, and I did economics at university. I didn't sort of have an ambition in life to run a nanny business or anything like that. I sort of fell into it on my gap year. When I was 18, I started nannying, and I joined a family. It was all completely by chance, and I nannied and I looked after the 4 children in that household, and I absolutely loved it. So I went straight from school. I joined them in October, and I'd never looked after children before. They were very trusting, very welcoming, and I think my mum thought they were slightly bonkers to have me look after their kids. But, the kids all survived. We had a great time. And I absolutely loved it. And I went to university, and I did economics. And I sort of had this dream, and like a lot of us do in life, we grow up and we think this is what we're going to do. And I had this dream. It was very clear that I was going to work in the city. I was going to work in finance. I was going to be really important. And I got to London, and I went to Bath University. And as part of that, most people do a placement year. So I worked in London for a year and then went back to finish my degree. So I'm there for my placement, working in finance, literally in the city, doing this dream that I'd always sort of dreamt of, and I absolutely hated it. I was like, this is not my life.
That's the universe trying to tell you something, though, Jo.
Yeah. So I was like, okay, this is great. I get to live here, I get to try it, and I've decided this is totally not my bag. So I was about halfway through my degree when I was like, right, I've got to figure out something else, because, it was about halfway through my placement, and I was like, I've got to figure out something else so that I can turn this job, if I get a job off, I can turn it down and go back and do something else. So I went back to university, and I did. I turned the job offer down, and I was like, I'm not going back to London, I'm not going back to that job. And that was like really contrary to everything my friends were doing.
Yeah, I'm sure.
They were all applying for the grad schemes. They were all moving to London. They were all like on the treadmill of life. And I was like, I'm just going to get off this treadmill actually and do something else. And I basically went back to doing, I'd always thought that I'd stayed with friends of the families that I'd nannied for. And I always thought there was a better way, like there was room for improvement basically. And so I did. I started my business. I did some research, and I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. And I was saying to somebody the other day, actually, I initially gave myself 6 months, and then I gave myself another 6 months. And I sort of said, get to the end of the 6 months, and if there's progress, if there's potential, then you keep going. And here I am now, almost 6 years later. We'll be 6 in May. Still going.
That's amazing. So I want to talk to you. I could have you on the show for various angles, because there's a lot of young entrepreneurs out there as well, and young people who started I want to feel important. I want to go and work in that big, towering office. And then like you realize okay, this is not for me. What was it like to go against the grain and say, well, everybody's going to A and I'm going to go to B? What were some of the thoughts that you had in your head?
Yeah, I was really fortunate in many ways. My family and my friends were only ever 110% behind me. They were always really encouraging. The hardest thing about it for me was the impact it has had in my 20s. And actually, that's something that I kind of reflect on. I was thinking about the weekend. So I've just turned 30. And for the entirety of my 20s, I have been building businesses.
Yep.
And it's hard. I have made relatively very little money compared to my friends. And the career trajectory when you start a business is that it's tough and you give it everything and the money doesn't come straight away. And it's not always about the money, but let's face it, the money is really important. And that is the hardest thing, is that, I for such a large portion of all of my working life, I have been building something, and I now can feel it going places. Yeah. So when you start, you have to have the courage and the conviction to keep going, because you can't it's not just going to take off overnight. And I suppose at times I've thought, can I keep going like this? Can I keep progressing like this, where you see your friends, going down that career trajectory of something, they're progressing, they're moving up, they're getting the bonuses, they're traveling the world, they're doing things. And I just couldn't at that stage, afford that kind of lifestyle. And whilst I'm still not there yet, I am going there. But ultimately, I love what I do. And whereas they are controlled by other things, I'm not. So there are swings and roundabouts to both, but definitely being in a place which you might not want to, where you can't do things you want to do, is, I would say, for me, the hardest bit, from a personal side. Yeah.
Absolutely. But, there's a price to everything. There's a price to high salaries and corporate benefits. And many people do stay in corporate and build amazing careers happily and feeling fulfilled by it. How did you know that it wasn't for you? You don't have to say anything bad about the company. I'm sure there's many people who've done well in that company as well. But how did you know personally that says, you know what, this thing isn't for me?
Do you know, the thing that has really stuck with me is that there were people I worked with. So I was 22, I think 22, 23 at the time of my placement. And the thing that has stuck with me is there were people who were 27, 28. They've been in the company for 4 years, 5 years, something like that. And they lived for the weekend. They came in on a Monday and they talked about the weekend. Mm-hmm. On a Tuesday, they might still be dragging out those conversations. And on Wednesday, they started thinking about the following weekend. And they planned their outfits, what they were going to wear, what they were going to do. And I was like, geez, I don't want to live like this. I don't want to live 7 days only to live for 2 of them. And I found that really weird, because that was coupled with the comments that they were unhappy, they didn't like their job. No fault of necessarily the company. It's just they stayed there for too long probably, and yet they wouldn't leave because they had become most of them had the reality is they've become financially comfortable, and to leave when you're secure is much harder than to start when you have nothing. So I was like, it just felt, it was so clearly and I could see that if I went back, I would end up like they were. And maybe I wouldn't, because I don't often say things, and not want to fix them. So I wouldn't necessarily have stayed in that sense, but I didn't feel, it just was a real eye-opener to me.
Yeah, and you wanted to live every day, enjoying every day, and looking forward to every day instead of just 2 of them. Yeah. Well, thankfully you had a very supportive family, but you can imagine there are some people whose parents are still in that you've got to go get a job in a nice corporate company, earn a big salary and everything. What advice would you give them if they were encountering a son or a daughter that's saying, you know what, Mom, Dad, this corporate thing isn't for me, and I really want to try my own business, even though financially it might not be cool for a while. What advice would you, because it was so long ago and you developed so much of yourself, what advice would you give parents when they face that?
I'd give parents, I'd say listen to your child. So I'd say listen to them. And if you have reservations around them leaving financial security, ask them how they're going to cope with that. What are they going to do? How are they going to adjust their lifestyle? You can support them, and can still question them. Like, it's important, I think, to also realise that the way that they live now is so. I'm trying to say this. No, get my words out. That they're how they if they are not happy in what they're doing, life is more important than them being happy in that. They need to be happy in what they do, and if they're in corporate and they're not enjoying that, then something has to change. And if they were to stay there because that feels or that looks like it's the right thing society wants them to do, then you, in all likelihood, as a parent, you may see bigger repercussions with your child further down the line. In terms of them having a breakdown or leaving or, doing something more radical or more drastic. And ultimately, if you've got a child that's in their 20s going, I want to start this thing up, like, great, because they have, as it goes, much lower risk. Their likelihood that they don't have a family yet, they don't have children to fund, they may or may not have a mortgage, but their kind of, their risk is so much lower. I have so much respect for people who leave a corporate job at 40 and go and start their own thing up, and they have all those pressures of that lifestyle that they need to kind of maintain and adjust. So I would say, if you are a parent and your child is saying this to you, then do your best to get behind them, but definitely ask them the questions that you have the concerns about. So if your questions are around how are they going to fund themselves, how are they going to, do they understand really what it looks like to do that? Ask them to kind of, give you the answers. Because it also may encourage them to really think, like, laterally, because we don't always, we just think, it'll be fine, like, I'll leave and I'll do it, and all the, I'll show up and the people and the money will roll in. But, like, having contingency plans is really important. And I think as a parent, you're really well positioned to ask those questions. But ultimately, remember, trying to remember that the way your children are is what really matters. And if they're not happy where they are, then changing now is better, probably in the long run.
Oh, amazing. That's great. Thank you for that. And we're supposed to be talking about your business, but you have so much inspiration to share with your own life. And you're a great childcare expert, because all of us are, because we have experience being a child. So we've been at the receiving end of that. And I want to come back after the song to talk about your business. But thank you so much for that inspiration. And I think it always helps for us to understand how to see things in a different way. So we'll be back after this, but first let's enjoy Hot and Cold by Katy Perry.
Radio Bath, made in Bath.
And we're back with Jo Chavasse, the founder and CEO of Freckles Childcare. Jo, you said that you were a nanny before and you saw some room for improvement in the industry, and that inspired you to create a business where you provide nanny care and nanny training. What were some of the gaps in the industry, and how did you go about fulfilling those gaps?
Okay, so when I started as a nanny, as I said before, I was straight out of school. So I had and because I'd never thought about nannying as a career, I also didn't grow up with a nanny. I didn't really have any eye into the industry. And I ended up in this family where they have 4 children. The youngest was 4 and the eldest was 13. The dad worked away and the mum worked part-time, and she worked a lot of evenings with her work. And I kind of I'm a real family person, and I just got thrown into this mix, and I did everything. I'd get the kids up, take them to school, pick them up, I'd do the housekeeping, I'd tidy up. They had a cleaner, so I kind of got everything ready, made sure so she'd come and do the cleaning, walk the dog when they got their dog, and literally did everything, coordinated with any builders, did any kind of PA stuff to help organise things, and I just threw myself into it. And as I was kind of doing this nannying, and as I stayed in touch with them after I left, I realised that actually isn't really what nannies typically did. They typically, very traditionally, nannies would come in and they'd work a sort of 8 to 6 shift because the parents would work in corporate. This is very traditional, old school perceptions of nannying. And they would only do things in association with the child. And as I started to talk to other parents, I would hear stories where nannies would not put the plate if you're the parent, you had toast this morning for breakfast, if you left your plate and your coffee cup on the side above the dishwasher or by the sink, they wouldn't touch it because it wasn't to do with the child.
Right, yes.
And for me, that was completely unacceptable, because I was like, but that means that parent comes home and they have to spend that time putting that stuff in the dishwasher rather than with their child.
Yes.
And like, I had a really black and white view of it, and I was like, oh my days, this is crazy. And I'm not, and as I've kind of learnt about the industry, absolutely, don't hold that as a criticism against nannies. So for example, the Norland nannies, they are trained to the highest standard. They are absolutely fantastic. We have a number of them that work for us, but they are brilliant. And if you wanted a nanny for your 3-month-old baby to solely focus on your baby with their child development, feeding, etc., fantastic. So that part of the industry is really well catered for, and that was great. But what I was working with was school age, and that wasn't at the time well catered for, because the parents didn't want or need an 8 till 6 Monday to Friday nanny, because their children were in school. And that kind of presents this problem where you need wraparound care, or you just need a different type of support. So we started I was like, well, what do I do with my days? And I worked out, did a couple of hours in the morning and a few hours in the afternoon. And actually every day I could do at least 2 hours of housekeeping and PA duties. So suddenly it's a split shift, but I've got extra duties, and I'm working more or less I'm working about 30 to 35 hours a week.
Yeah.
And that as a salary is pretty standard, it's pretty good. It also allowed me a little bit of extra time if somebody has a dog of their own, they want to go home and walk or something like that. So we worked out how I could cater to parents who have school-age children, but also attract people to do that role who hadn't necessarily done nannying before. Because when you have an older child as well, you don't necessarily need somebody trained in, child development of 0 to 2-year-olds, because
they're quite independent.
Past that bit, you need somebody a bit different. And that's where it wasn't catered. That was the hole that I could see. And parents I knew were going through nannies at a rate of knots. Mainly, a lot of them had au pairs, but also because they couldn't find people that were happy with this kind of fewer number of hours a week, and the different kind of responsibilities. So my concept was to go in and do childcare and housekeeping. And that's where it started. When I started the business, it was quite prescriptive. I was like, this is the solution to everyone's problem. And then I realised that no one has the same problem as anybody else. There are similarities. So I was like, this great solution I've created, it's not actually the solution for everybody. So I then was like, right. So I kind of readjusted, and I realised I needed to be able to offer a service which was, what do you as a family require? You tell me, I will then look at it and come up with a solution on that basis. And the jobs were nearly all of our jobs combine childcare and housekeeping, but they vary in size from 1 or 2 afternoons a week to 5 days a week, and with everything in between. So I took away the prescriptiveness of it in terms of the hours and what I thought the solution was, and we just started by creating people that would become part of your family, that were part of your team, that were that elder sibling vibe, who would, get stuck in, part of the gang. Nothing was too big a deal, particularly like, running errands or doing things, unloading the shopping, cooking for everyone, because our objective was and always has been to enable our parents to spend more quality time with their children. And that means just facilitating that time so that when they walk in the door, they can get down on the floor and play Lego with Henry. They can read a story. They can do bath time. They can, do some creative play, whatever it is that time allows for, but actually constructive time with their children, rather than them trying to unload the dishwasher or do their laundry or like run around and after the rest of family.
Yes.
Because their children have been really well looked after. So that was the big kind of improvement that I saw, that we needed people that were happy to be part of a family, part of a team, and who were willing and able to do all of and anything. And that requires a different person to the traditional nanny.
Absolutely.
Because the traditional nanny is fantastic when you do have a baby through to preschool kind of age, and you need somebody with them 50 hours a day, 50 hours a week. Brilliant. Like, that is catered for. So we're not trying to cater towards that. So that's kind of was the big thing I saw. And then the second thing for me that I experienced when I was nannying was the importance of emotional health with children. And I realised that you, as the nanny, you are the eyes and ears of the parents when they're not there. And you owe it to the parents to do the best job you can do in terms of attentiveness to their child's emotional and mental well-being.
Yeah.
Because most of us have their physical well-being pretty down to a T. We're like, right, clean clothes, we fed them.
Yeah, they're dry.
all good.
No cuts, no blood running anywhere.
Exactly. Got that bit first. But it's the mental and emotional side that most of us have no training in, we don't have any support in. We don't really know what we're looking for. And I was like, I've got to, because of the situation that I was in when I nannied, I was like, I've got to do something to support my nannies in this. I never want them to feel as helpless as I felt.
Yeah.
So I made it my objective to train all of our nannies in emotional well-being. And we have done that we probably started doing that almost 4 years ago. And we have trained every single nanny that works for us in a permanent placement in children's emotional health.
Could you tell us a little bit, like, emotional health? What does that actually mean, and to what level can you handle emotional health issues or care for emotional health?
Of course. So it's very top level. So our training is a single full day intensive, and then they get a booklet and kind of a manual that goes alongside that we've written with a psychologist. So all the training is delivered by a psychologist that I brought on board. And she's a mum and a confidence and anxiety kind of coach psychologist. She's absolutely fantastic. So the idea is that we're equipping our nannies with top level knowledge on things like anxiety, attachment, resilience, confidence, all of that stuff. And we are looking to enable our nannies to feel confident that if a situation is happening and they're seeing it, that they can start to see the red flags or the patterns of behaviour that might suggest the child is struggling emotionally.
Right.
And therefore they can raise that with the parents.
Okay.
So, for example, if I am a nanny and I do after school pickups 5 days a week, I am that parent's eyes and ears in the playground and in that post-school situation. And if I'm going to school and every Tuesday for like 3 weeks, I notice that Henry's crying after, he has football, let's say, and I'm like, what is going on here? Through my training, I'm hoping what happens, the hope is that we notice there's a red flag here and we're going, right, okay, there's a trigger, something's going on. It's not just he fell over and hurt his knee at training, at football that day, but actually there's a pattern of behaviour. And you can then work out how to have those conversations with the child. You can raise it to mum and dad, and you can say, look, picked him up, that there were tears this week, asked a few questions in the car, with no eye contact, when it's a bit easier for the child to have the conversation. And he said, oh, the boys were leaving me out. And this has become a pattern that we're seeing. So how can we support him with his confidence there? He's losing his confidence. He now doesn't want to go to football. Like, we're getting into a cycle of behaviour here. So it's about being just that. Whereas if we didn't have that training, we might just think, oh, he's fine. Oh, he's just feeling a bit mopey. Oh, he's just a bit down in the dumps. And actually, what we're trying to do is just nip these little the flare-ups in the bud as best we can and pass them up the chain. So pass them up to mum and dad. If it's escalating, pass it on. They can get the support that they need, and all of those things. And it might be triggers from home, taking them into school. Could be anything. But that awareness of how children feel, and if they're saying to you something like, so-and-so is being mean to me at school, and you're hearing that once, you're hearing that twice, instead of dismissing it as, oh, darling, don't be silly, this is just girls being mean, we're going, okay, why is that happening? How's that happening? What does that look like for you? And because we don't want that to escalate to a point where the cry for help gets louder and louder and more scary in terms of the action. So it's just trying to be that educated eyes and ears on the ground for the parents. So the parents, you can feel like, that someone is not only looking after your child's physical well-being, they are doing their best to look after their emotional well-being as well.
Exactly. And when we come back, I want to talk to you about your perspective on what's happening now with homeschooling and then changing back to going back to school. The work environment is changing, and how have you adapted? But
made locally in Bath. This is Radio Bath.
And this is Brave Business Conversations with Cynthia Wihardja and Jo Chavasse, founder of Freckles childcare. We talk about the mental health of the kids as your top priority as well, and this is how you teach your nannies, and this is the gap in the market too. Tell us about what's changed with all this COVID and the changes in school rules, homeschooling, both from a parent's point of view as well as what's happening with the kids.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say, and I say to all of our parents, is that you are doing an amazing job. Like, all of these parents out here who have spent the best part of a year now juggling homeschooling to whatever degree it might be at the time and working from home and everything else that requires, you're doing amazingly. Like, this isn't absolutely completely. Like, we are asking you to do multiple jobs at the same time and still keep everything in the air and everyone alive. It's a massive ask, and you're doing amazingly. So that's my first. Always say that. I'm so impressed. I think it's really tough, and I think it's really tough for our parents and for our children. Kids are naturally social. They thrive from being around other children, and you can see examples of children who are slightly shy and reserved, whose anxiety and attachment went through the roof with the fear and anticipation of going back to school either back in September, or we may see that as soon as the next announcement comes through when they have a sort of a date in mind. You can also see the children who, like, the way that they form relationships has changed a little bit. But so I do think it has a big impact on our children. It's not going to. I don't think it's. I think there's lots of positives to be done with it, lots of ways to kind of work through it. But I do think we will be experiencing particularly heightened anxiety and attachment as we make these transitions back into school again, where children are used to being around mum and dad or mum and mum permanently, and suddenly that's not going to be the case. We've seen that with our nannies. We have a lot of temporary nannies that go in and support families at the moment. And, that's tough. If you are working from home and you've got, let's say, a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and they've been around you all the time, and suddenly we're asking a nanny to look after them, and so you can get your work done, that child is used to having you there, used to, calling upon you, and that can be quite hard for them and for you. Because often that amounts to kind of tears and tantrums.
Right, because they have the attachment. What does, just on that one point, okay, you're used to being the caretaker, now you've hired a nanny. What are some advice that you can give to help your children overcome that attachment?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to set clear boundaries. So clear expectations, talk your children through it. So, and having a space where you as mum or dad or whoever's, as the parent, you're going to do your work. So there is a space for your child to engage in play and do things with your nanny. What we want to do is to build a really strong and positive relationship with the nanny as fast as we can. That's kind of the objective. So thinking about what do they want to do with the child. What does your child like doing? Do they like doing arts and crafts, creative things? Is it Lego? Is it going out and about on a walk? Is it baking? And kind of putting together a list or lots of ideas that the nanny can do with the child on that over those, well, always, but particularly over those first few days, so they have a really good time. Also, it's really hard as a parent if your child gets upset. you hear that noise, and your instinct, of course, is to go to them, but potentially trying to, give the nanny a chance, a couple of minutes to see if they can get on with it. Have they had some strategies on how to cope with any discipline or fighting, so they don't need to ask you for help and get your intervention? When the children know that mum's at home or parents at home, they sort of, kids are so savvy. They're like, I know she's upstairs, and they'll beetle out the door, and they'll be up the stairs in a flash outside your door, bang on it while you're on conference call. So it, if you can kind of give the structure in terms of, right, it's nanny time for the next hour, mummy will see you for lunch at midday. Give that a go, see how that works. But it totally depends. So like I give these ideas, but it really depends on you and your child and the way your family operate. And what works for some families won't work for others. And so please don't judge your capacity and the way that you are operating at the moment against any other family. Just what works for you is what matters. And different things work for our families all the time. But the typical things to try are, what are the activities that will typically really engage your child, and sometimes they will really work to help that child build the relationship with the nanny.
Sure. And of course, if any of the parents listening right now want to get personalized advice and tell a bit of the story of your own family, they can always contact you. How do we contact you, Jo, or your team?
Yeah, best thing to do is to go to our website, which is freckelschildcare.co.uk, and you can give us a ring or pop us an email from there. And we're on Instagram at Freckles Childcare as well. But the website is probably the easiest way to signpost yourself.
So, how, with all that experience under your belt, how do you choose nannies? Because obviously you need a certain type of people, and the people who are working for you are quite young. Many of them may not even have kids yet. They might be big sisters or brothers, but they might not have kids of their own. So how do you choose them, train them?
Big question. So, the recruitment is the toughest part of the job in terms of for us, and we are actually sort of pivoting the business. So as I mentioned earlier, I've always trained in emotional health. We've always trained in emotional health, but we are now running intensive residential week-long courses to train junior nannies. So to take people like I was as a school leaver, or potentially recent graduates, or those who just want to work in nannying, and training them across the board in a variety of modules to give them that experience, that leg up, and get everything sorted for them to start. The benefit of that system, the way we do that now, is that we spend a week with them. We constantly assess them, and therefore we get to know them really well and feel really confident about the families that they would thrive in, and equally the families where I wouldn't want to put them forward because I just don't feel like they would connect or resonate. So we do a lot of the training, that's really helped. But if we're just recruiting like we're doing at the moment, because as we build our training model, we are still recruiting nannies. We have a really intensive recruitment process. There are 4 stages, multiple interviews. They do CV, video CVs. They have to pass sort of assessments, and grillings from the team, and they get interviewed by 2 team members.
Wow, I'm looking forward to applying, Jo.
I know. Scare you off. Not really, because if you are a nanny listening to this thinking, oh, good Lord, I'm never going near that. No, don't. Come to us. We're lovely. We're lovely, but we just have to get to know you, and we have to check, because I have to be able to stand there and confidently say to any client who comes to me that I trust your judgment as a nanny.
And what I like about your process is you've got to come in with a certain character. You've got to be that potential when you are recruited, but you train. You see, there's no point trying to over-expect from a candidate. The point is any good company will have their own training, and that's how you get them to do it your way. So I like that. Yeah.
And actually on that note, we never, when you apply, we are never looking at your experience and qualifications. We look at your personality. Your experience and qualifications, of course, factor in, and we look at them dependent on a job application, for example, with a specific role. But in terms of it is your personality that matters, because I've always said it, I can teach you and train you with everything you need to know, but I cannot change your attitude.
Yeah,
I cannot fundamentally change who you are.
Yeah.
So that is really important as well. And there are definite benefits to having nannies that are kind of junior nannies that are coming up, because they're really, in the loveliest way, malleable. When they go into a family, as a family, you know, they can really adapt and come in. Whereas, you know, as if you hire somebody into a company who's got a one way of looking at it, sometimes that works brilliantly and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
So often you know, if you are eyes open going into getting a junior nanny, then they generally will really adapt to your family.
Absolutely.
Way of working.
Here's some thinking as well. A lot of people are getting out of university, they can't find a job, or they already have a job for a little bit and then they got furloughed or laid off. Is being a nanny a good career? Because I think, this has nothing to do with childcare, obviously, but just on an off topic, like if I wanted to be a nanny, is that a good career? Is that a good lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say yes, it can be a great career. I think there are two ways of looking at it in terms of considering being a nanny. There is looking at it as like a lifetime career path, and there's looking at it as a short term, get me to the next step, help me get where I want to be. And both of them are brilliant. If you want to be a lifetime nanny forever, get stuck in, get yourself, onto, for example, we'd say, come on our course, get into a job, start building it up, and you'll progress fairly quickly up the ranks, and you'll get younger children, you'll get more responsibility, you'll get higher pay. It's really good. You can get some really good job offers, really good perks, travel, accommodation, things like that. So there's lots of cool stuff. If you are a graduate out of work at the moment and you're thinking, I just want to do something that feels really good whilst I figure out where I'm going, and whilst the economy settles down, and whilst, you might have all these reasons, then also I think nannying is a brilliant thing to do, because when you nanny, you will never learn anything that's of detriment to your life. You will only ever learn things that will help you in the future, like life skills. Running a home is a massive life skill. Juggling things like the children and a home environment and working and all of those things, challenges you might face. Working closely with part of a team with demands coming from you from parents and from children, and learning how to kind of deal with those. You will only ever learn, it'll only ever serve you. And also, it can do really well in terms of if you're wanting something part-time for the moment, whilst you continue applying for other jobs, or part-time whilst you start building your business, or part-time while you just figure out what you're going to be doing, or saving for some travelling. So you can go into it with either lens of, this is my career for life, or this is my next career step for a couple of years, 2,
Brilliant.
3, 4, 5 years.
That's very good.
Yeah, I think it's a really, and often it's overlooked in that sense as well.
Yeah,
I think
good. If I wanted to build a family, I'd try to take care of other people's kids first, and the only thing, it only gets easier, right? Once you get all that, householding and everything in place, when you have your own kid, they have their attachment to you, so it's only going to be easier. I would think.
Yeah.
That you're right. You get trained, but it's a skill that you will always use forever. Jo, it's been lovely having you on the show, and I think you impressed me on at least two angles. First is your entrepreneurial spirit, and finding that gap in the market, and really using your past skills to go through it, and being really honest with yourself that whole corporate thing, feeling important, is not as important as making yourself happy. And the second thing is the whole principle, the business model that you've got around Freckles Childcare is very interesting, because it addresses a gap in the market, and also you're trying to make it bulletproof by having the training as well as the placement side of the business, and it's kind of each one feeds into each other, which is great. Again, could you just repeat how we can get a hold of you, and if we have any questions, just repeat all your website, your social media stuff, so that people can get in touch.
Yeah, so the best place to get in touch with us is through our website, which is frecklechildcare.co.uk, and on there you can email us or give us a ring, and we'll get back to you. Or you can follow us on Instagram, which is Freckles Childcare, and that's naming me on Instagram. So, and you can send me a message on there too. But we'll, just get in touch, and we'll be able to help, or just offer some advice, or just hear you out what's going on, and let us know. It'd be lovely to hear from people.
Absolutely. Thanks for being on the show. And again, if you are someone who's looking for a career, a transition, or something that you want to retrain yourself in, consider being a nanny. Contact Jo and have a chat at least, and discover more about her detailed course. Secondly, if you're a parent looking for help, looking for a way to spend more time or quality time with your kids, look into Freckles Health, childcare, and get in touch with Jo that way. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Jo, for supporting Radio Bath, and all the best in your business. Thanks for being here.
UK. Made locally in Bath. This is Radio Bath.